die Sprache, damit die nächsten Panelisten auch wissen, dass ich sie anmoderiere. So now let's switch to English. Digital sovereignty is something everyone is talking about at the moment. But what does this actually mean for a public sector who is going more and more digital? Our next panel takes a closer look on this question, and we have some fresh European perspectives now on these topics, with insights from frontrunners like Latvia and Denmark. So please join me now in welcoming your host for this session, Esther Steverding. She's the division manager for public sector from Bitkom, and she's responsible for this great program here at the Smart Country Convention. So please give a warm welcome to Esther. Hi.
Thank you, Linda. I just have to make myself here on stage. Yeah, nice to meet you here at Smart Country Convention 2025. I'm happy to have you here, and Linda already said it. Digital sovereignty, AI, and cloud are the buzzwords, not even here at Smart Country Convention, but also within the political discussion and maybe also in society and during your daily work as well. And that's why we combine these three big topics within one panel with four great panelists, and we will ask the question, what is digital sovereignty within the public sector? What do we mean when we say that? Is it about open source? Is it about data center? Is it about competencies and skills? Or is it about all of them or not all of them? That's what we want to discuss here. And we have four outstanding panelists, as Linda already said, from all over Europe, including Germany, because digital sovereignty does not work alone, and we need to have a partnership. That digital sovereignty is not our blank space and will not become our blank space here in Germany. I'm happy to announce the first speaker here on stage with a short impulse on the Danish and European digital sovereignty and its geopolitical roots. He's already at my left side, and it's Ulrik Vestergaard Knudsen, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Netcompany, a Danish IT provider, and he is also the former Deputy Secretary General at the OECD. Ulrik, we are happy to have you here. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Esther, for this invitation to speak about not only digital sovereignty for Europeans, for Danes, for Latvians, for Italians, but also a little bit about my home country Denmark, its digitization journey, and the EU presidency that we in Denmark are holding right now. But I don't think it makes any sense to talk about European ambitions or to talk about digital sovereignty with a little bit of a geopolitical fly-in, because we would not be discussing digital sovereignty the way we are now without the geopolitical upheaval that we've been observing not only in 25 but for the last decade or two, and the same goes for the framework conditions, the global conditions for conducting an EU presidency. And I gotta warn you, the first 8 of my 10 minutes will be a little bit doom and gloom because there's not that much hope to find in geopolitics these days, but I promise to end on a happy note, so stay tuned. First of all, a couple of bold predictions about the world we inhabit today. I think, first of all, we have to realize that the world order that we have known for 80 years and that we have thrived from in Denmark, in Germany, in Europe, is over. It is not coming back, and certainly not in the form that we have seen for the last 80 years. I think we have to navigate from that starting point. It's a dire starting point, but I think we have to realize that, and digital sovereignty is perhaps part of the answer to this. The other, almost as bold prediction, is that I don't think we are going to see much longevity when it comes to the concept of the West. The West as a framework for common pursuit of shared interests and values among what used to be Western countries, I think is also over. Biden gave it life support, but I think it is forever gone. I don't think Europeans are ever fully, deeply, 100% going to trust the Americans again, and that's another important starting point, and again, very important to understand the world in which we discuss digital sovereignty. Very briefly, there are 5 tectonic trends that have led us to this situation actually for some time, and you could say that the arrival of a man with orange hair in a White House has accelerated all of these 5. Firstly, briefly, the beginning breakdown of the institutional order, whether it's the United Nations, the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank, these institutions are not as strong as they used to be. They're not fully living up to their mandates. If you have any doubt, go back and watch Donald Trump's speech to the UN General Assembly last week, he is pulling the US back from all these institutions that we Europeans helped create. A big of a problem, of course, for us. I don't think we'll be able to reform them, but I do think we should try to save whatever's left, because a world without them will be much more difficult for Europeans than a world with them. Second tectonic trend, open markets, no longer plan A for anyone. You could argue it never was perhaps for China, except our open markets, but even the US, long before Trump started sort of shying away from globalization. I think Donald Trump, unfortunately, will be able to almost kill the multilateral trading system, but I don't think he'll be able to kill globalization. We're seeing new forms of open pluralism. The EU Commission is wisely pursuing regional, bilateral trade arrangements all over the world, accelerating some, deepening others. So I think we will see at best a reglobalization, at worst perhaps a beginning of a deceleration of globalization. Thirdly, third tectonic trend, states are increasingly helplessness in combating climate change. We have to look to the private sector, perhaps public-private partnerships, in order to solve that crisis. When I'm in my most sarcastic mood, I say I used to think this was the tectonic trend that was going to kill us. Now I'm not so sure that one of the others won't beat it to it, but let's see. Then tectonic trend 4 and 5, which actually together make up the whole case for digital sovereignty. The fourth one is what you could say, if you take a global view, of the move from relative order to relative disorder, or what you could also call transactional anarchy. Anarchy because rules no longer seem to apply, rules no longer seem to govern states or the way states govern their relations. I come from Denmark, where we've had a few drones over the last couple of weeks, so I normally say in Denmark, if you don't believe me, find an airport near you tonight and look up in the sky, and you will see that rules no longer apply. This, of course, has then the added dimension of a more transactional world, a world in which the likes of India, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia have already been transactional for a while. They have refused to choose between the West and China, Russia, if you like. They may like our values more, but they don't like the way we pursue our values. They think we apply double standards when we look at different conflicts around the world, Ukraine versus Israel and so on, but that's another matter. This means, of course, that Europe is perhaps more united than ever, but also more alone than ever. And if you combine that, this transactional anarchy, with the fifth tectonic trend, the move towards digital transformation and perhaps digital sovereignty, you have the underpinnings of a new digital Europe. I will argue today that the digital transformation, digital sovereignty may be the most important of these 5 tectonic trends. Why? One, because if the engine of globalization is turned off, there's really only one source left for the progress, the economic growth, the productivity that we need in Europe and elsewhere, and that is from technological or digital, if you like, progress. The second reason is that the digital transformation is already reconstructing our societies that even us in the business perhaps have difficulties fathom. It's very difficult to see what the world will look like in just 5 years. And then the third reason why this is more important. We now live in a world where everyone is fighting for global supremacy. That is how Xi thinks, Putin thinks, Trump thinks, and we Europeans have to wake up to this reality. And this fight for world supremacy will, I hope, not be in the military arena. I actually am not predicting a third world war. It'll certainly not be in the ideological arena either, like the Cold War, because they have the same thing in common, these 3 gentlemen I just mentioned. They do not care about ideology one bit. So this fight is going to happen in the technological arena. And if you don't believe me, then see how these gentlemen have acted, what they've said. They're already investing in the future in a way that we have not been able to in Europe. So that leaves us with a concept of digital sovereignty that's very, very difficult to balance, because we need to regain control of our digital infrastructure. We need to become more digitally sovereign, but we don't want to throw away our openness. We don't want to become digital protectionists either. So for me, this is not necessarily about shutting anyone out. It's about providing more European choice for our consumers, for our companies, but also what you could call strategic optionality. So 4 essential, if not existential, reasons why Europe now really has to embrace the digital transformation, digital sovereignty. 1, for you, customers, consumers, companies to make our products better, safer, and cheaper as well. That's sort of the eternal reason. That's the commercial reason. The second is the macroeconomic level one, the Draghi level one. I forgot to swear on the Draghi report before I entered the podium. Everyone should do that these days. It's all in there. Read the 800 pages. That's what Europe should do. And again, as he says, we cannot afford to miss another digital revolution in Europe if we are to gain competitiveness, growth, and productivity. That's the second layer. Then the two last ones, the new ones. The third one is the geopolitical layer. We as a continent in Europe will not have geopolitical clout, will not have geopolitical power if we don't have the technological progress and economic growth to underpin it. Then we will fall even further behind like we've done the last 30 years. And then the fourth one, which is really new, it's about our values that used to be Western values, but now look increasingly like European values. Our twin, our big brother, big sister across the Atlantic is no longer with us when it comes to protecting democracy, minors, human rights, freedom, and so on. So if we want our children and grandchildren to inhabit a world that is sort of underpinned by the values that we care for, we need to get at the forefront of technological progress. That leaves me with Europe and the Danish EU presidency. I will not dwell on it too long. Denmark, I think, is nicely situated to take on this task. We are the most digitized country in the world, both when it comes to the public sector and the private sector. Far-sighted politicians made sure that was a possibility, but also companies like my own Netcompany that were able to deliver the capabilities for a really modern digital infrastructure in Denmark. This means that we can now focus on making Europe digitally more competitive. That is what the Danish government has said. But there are also some of these values I mentioned, protecting minors on the internet. But I think we have to do more than that in Europe. We also have to make sure that the research and talent that we undoubtedly have on this continent, that we are able to turn that into innovation. We've not been good enough for that. And second step on the ladder, we've not been good enough to turn that innovation into commercial opportunities. And then the third step, we've not been good enough at turning those commercial opportunities into real scale. For a company like my own and many other European companies that are out there, trying to modernize the European digital infrastructure, this scaling problem is actually quite big because it means that we cannot help Europe with our digital sovereignty making in practice, be that if it comes to tax and customs or welfare systems or digital wallet or digital post. I have not received a letter from any Danish government agency or municipality for the last 8 years. I haven't sent one either. That should be rolled out into Europe. That is digital sovereignty in practice. So let me end by just underlining how high the stakes are here. When you take the sum of everything I've said, what's at stake really here is the business model that turned our countries into some of the most prosperous and successful in all of Europe. What's at stake is also our values. I think I've spelled that out quite clearly. And it's also our security, to be honest. I don't think any of us can feel quite as secure today as we did a year ago. For me, as a Dane, Greenland being part of the Danish kingdom, it's even our territory. But I promise to end on a happy note. And despite all of this doom and gloom, there are still at least 5 statistics that I can pull out from my OECD past, and I checked them, they're still relevant, that make it in September on the brink to October 25 better to be European than American. One is we actually live longer. 2, we work less. 3, we are more happy. Perhaps because we work less, but it's self-reported happiness, but nonetheless, we may be fooling ourselves, but it's the way we see ourselves. 4, we emit less CO2 than the Americans, and 5, we actually also have much better access to universal health care. On top of that, we are also societies with a remarkable degree of trust, I think also increasingly between states in Europe. So if we can build on that, I do believe that we have a real chance of receiving or benefiting from a European economic renaissance, perhaps even a digital renaissance. We're already in the midst of a political one. Thank you.
Wherever you want. It's This is mine, but the other ones you can have. Okay, great. Thanks for ending on a positive note. That makes it easier for the panel. And yeah, panelists, please come on stage. I would then shortly do the introduction from here. As you can see, we are 4 panelists now on stage, and starting here in the middle with Francesca Bria. She is a professor and initiator of the Eurostack. You might have heard about it, a big European digital sovereignty project, and she's kind of the head of it, the great mastermind behind it, and she will present it to us. What does it mean? What does it include? Who has to contribute? Francesca, we are happy to have you here. Then, was it an applause? Yes. Thank you. Then we have Dr. Martin Klein, Senior Vice President, Global Public Services Industries from SAP, and he will add the German perspective on that topic and also the aspect of how companies like SAP can foster innovation and sovereignty that Ulrik already touched upon. Nice to have you here. And last but not least, here on the outer side, we have Gatis Ozols from Latvia. He's Deputy State Secretary on Digital Transformation Affairs and the Government CIO in Latvia, and working at the Latvian Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development. And he will add the Latvian aspect to our discussion, because Latvia is also a really digital country. We learned at last year Smart Country Convention, where Latvia was our partner country. So happy to have you here once again. Okay, so we had an impulse, and I already said we want to talk about Eurostack, and for that we have to know what Eurostack is. So Francesca, would you please give us a short introduction what Eurostack is, what you're thinking about?
Yes, hello everyone. Great to be here. Well, actually it's an easier job to come after the presentation, because it was made clear the context in which the Eurostack was created, but also what are the key challenges that Europe is facing. So the Eurostack is a report that we wrote not even 1 year ago, and that sparked, I would say, a movement in Europe, which is a wake-up call on one side to Europe to reclaim digital sovereignty, understanding that technological sovereignty also means industrial competitiveness, security, and democracy. Not lastly, because it's a very important part of the concept. But also, I think it served, and I have to say, as a mental model to understand what's at stake, but also to mobilize a little bit the European way of doing innovation. Because I think we have a lot of problems, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But there is one question which I think goes very deep into why Europe doesn't have its own capabilities when we are talking about digital. Why Europe is lagging behind, as Professor Draghi is showing us, with very clear innovation gaps and, I mean, very clear vulnerabilities, which I think is deeply cultural. And we do not believe that it's possible to make innovation here in Europe and to have our own model, that it's not copying Silicon Valley or Beijing. And I'm not saying this is an easy task, but at the moment this is becoming almost existential, as also Draghi is saying. So the Eurostack, basically, first of all, it's showing us that we need to look at the entire digital stack. And I hope we will discuss this, because many times I have a pushback. So from critical raw materials to chips to connectivity to data centers, AI, and applications. And why is because of the geopolitical issues. So if you don't look, for example, at the dependency that you have in critical raw materials, which are the basis of every technology we use, 80% are processed in China, and China has a monopoly over critical raw materials. If you move up in the chips, all the critical components that we use, advanced chips, to do any of the innovation stuff, in particular to train AI models, are made in Asia, mostly in Taiwan and South Korea, so we're fully dependent in a very geopolitical, vulnerable area. When we look at cloud, 70% of the cloud that we use in Europe is US cloud, So it's actually subject to the US Cloud Act and to national security from the United States. If we look at artificial intelligence in the last years, I mean, for example, AI startups in the US have got invested around 100 and more billions, and in Europe we only mobilize 8 billions. And if we look at the models, foundation models, in Europe we only made 3, while in the US 40, and in China 15, and China is catching up rapidly. So this is actually a little bit like a war bulletin if you look at the numbers. 80% of the digital services we use in Europe, 80%, 80, are foreign technology. Now, these are the numbers. So I think we have to ask, and the Eurostack is a framework to show that this is happening, but also to put forward a plan for Europe. And that's where I think we should focus, because the question today, it's not anymore if digital sovereignty is important or do we need it. I think the question is how. Where do we start? What we prioritize? What are the main problems? And to wrap up this first introduction, I would say, for me, the main question is capabilities. I think we have to create the capabilities here in Europe to say that next generation will be European. This is a very important time. So even if now, in the short term, you're going to tell me where, we have retaliations coming from the US, so we are forced into a trade deals where we're going to buy 40 billion of NVIDIA chips. We can't stay without the US cloud. Yes, we all know that. So here we're not advocating for a, interruption and we shift all of a sudden. No, we're advocating for a plan that looks at the longer term, strategically building European capabilities and, tackling the choke points that make our continent in danger in this geopolitical moment. And at the same time, we want to loosen dependencies and we want to control and acquire new capabilities. So it's okay if we are using a lot of AI models coming from the US or from China, but we need to do it knowing that we have to create the knowledge to create this in Europe. That is a little bit what the Eurostack is all about. And let me say, we also say, along with Draghi, that we need to invest. Because investment is really key, and it's not the only component, but here we're advocating, for example, for a 100 billion sovereign tech fund in Europe that could create this capability, that is not only investing in startups, but also in critical infrastructures and technologies. And we are saying to all of you here that create European alternatives, that we need to make these alternatives visible. So we're asking government to procure 50% at least with public budget of European alternative technologies based on open source, open standards, data sovereignty, and so on. 50% at least of strategic procurement, buying technologies produced by European players in Europe. So I will come to that later. The key things that the Eurostack is putting forward. And sorry, a bit long, but let me finish. There are 250 companies that signed our report backing this process. The German government has put the Eurostack in the coalition agreement. The Danish presidency has made this digital sovereignty a priority. I'm working with the French government, with the Spanish government, with Netherlands, with cities. So, the players are there. The political momentum is here, but the action is too slow. So we need to understand what to do to make this happen.
That's a great summary for our panel, what we're talking about. Thank you very much, and also for the presentation of Eurostack. As you mentioned other European countries, I will hand over to Gatis, because last year we as Bitkom and our members, we had the chance to travel to Latvia to exchange with a lot of companies, a lot of public sector representatives. And they had one thing in common. They were all very aware of the potential threats. One of their neighbors is giving to Latvia threats to the infrastructure, to national security, and they all agreed that they need a resilient state, a state that is able to act. So, Gatis, how do you understand digital sovereignty in Latvia, and how do you tackle it in your daily work? What's your strategy?
Thank you. That's a very topical question at these times. And exactly, the threats are not only theoretical, but if we look, for example, of the number of cyber incidents that we are having in Latvia, that in comparison to previous year, they grew by 1/3. But if we compare it to 2022, before invasion of Ukraine, they have growth like three times. So we definitely resilience have always been as a back of our mind when we speak about our digital infrastructure, digital services for the government, for also for the businesses, and this has always been one side of our also motivation. As Ulrik speaks, there could be a different motivations of digital development. It's like quality of services, it's efficiency, but for it also always has been resilience of the country and the critical services. How we tackle it nationally, we can divide it like 2 levels. One is like a soft level. You also have to work not only with technological stuff, but also with the citizens. So they would like take decisions based on the competent decisions, become less vulnerable for and had like critical thinking for fraud, disinformation that we often experience in Latvia. Cyber hygiene, ransomware, business email compromising, it's also the part of the game. On the national level, we have created a national cybersecurity center, which works also with those soft things as well. Information update support programs for enterprises, and also tooling for personal security, such as DNS, firewall, and such things. On operational level, I think there would be a difference if we compare smaller countries or more compact countries like our are and some bigger countries, because in our perspective, we can't see digital sovereignty as an option, as a way we are like doing our own things locally. So we see digital sovereignty as availability of options and the possibility to get different options, the strategic flexibility. So whether it's from private sector, whether it's from public sector, and this is the thing how we see. Some years ago, we did research together with OECD on going digital Latvia, and there was interesting part. We had also foresight kind of element in that, and we were looking on different scenarios, how could world develop. Like one scenario was it was very focused on public sector infrastructure development, platforms run by government and so on. Other one was like by industry driven, that everyone will stack on the industry. And then the third one like was society driven, open source and so on. And we see that we have to leverage all those options, and we have to provide the way how we can partner in all those scenarios. So public and private providers, for example, in national identity, we are looking how national identity tools could be provided both by public sector and also by private sector. And we have implemented this in Latvia. Private, national, cross-border, or public cloud solution. There's also, we see that there are different risks that can be tackled with different ways how we leverage our technological stack, but still we have to have those options, because we as a compact country, we know that we won't have like enough stack to sustain all the technological stack locally. From the perspective of risks also, we see as a neighboring country, we have to have an option to get out of the country with our processes, critical services. So we are creating also these out of the country capabilities to run our critical services. So and closed source or open source as well, one of the solutions that we are tackling. So we see that sovereignty also can be viewed as a spectrum, not like a binary option. So for different risks, you choose different options, and then you see whether it's like a legal sovereignty aspects, data sovereignty aspects, or operational, that you can run specific technology. So I believe that there's no like specific complete sovereignty, but we are somewhere in between and have to choose wisely which options we are going.
Okay, thank you. We'll come to that later with partner and having options, but we would also like to introduce or get Martin here into the discussion. So it was already mentioned that we need companies, European companies, scaling companies, and I would do a check for everyone for SAP. And how do you define digital sovereignty at SAP, and how does it mirror in the products and solutions you offer to the public and to the private sector?
So we at SAP consider 4 dimensions when we talk about digital sovereignty. So it's the data sovereignty that was mentioned. The second one is a technical sovereignty, that we look at the entire stack from the infrastructure up to the application layer. We talk about the operational sovereignty, so that's not only the question like where the data sovereignty, like where is the data stored, but the operational is then like who has access, is the security cleared personnel? And then of course the legal sovereignty. I think an important distinction is sovereignty versus autarky, right? I think we should not mix the two, right? One is sovereignty, but it should be an open field also for vendors from whatever other countries or other geopolitical regions, as long as they apply to the European regulations and values, right? We at SAP have experience for 20 years with this. We have a subsidiary in the US that for 20 years has already delivered sovereign services to the US government, and we are in process. We have rebuilt that in Australia and the UK. We have here the presence of Delos, who's doing that in Germany, and we're in process of setting it up for Europe. And we are continuously investing. So last week we made the announcement that we are going to run the open AI large language model out of the sovereign cloud in Germany, to making that regulations. And of course that is important that everything is in line with the European regulations. And that is obviously ever changing, and so we are continuing to invest and adopt this one.
Okay, thank you very much for that short impulse and on SAP's digital sovereignty. So I would like to open up the panel now. That was the introduction session or introduction round for everyone. And we already touched the topic of public procurement. It's a really big thing. Francesca, you said it within your impulse. And the European Commission works on an evaluation of the public procurement directives. Also maybe with a highlight or with fostering by European. What's your opinion on that? Is that the right thing to do, or what do we have to may also have in mind when we're thinking about that? How do we get the solution, the innovator solutions, maybe also into Europe or from Europe to Europe? Ulrik, what would you say?
I've been a little bit torn over this issue for a couple of years. I'm an economist by training. I wrote my thesis about trade policy. I come from a small country that's open and already, always benefited from open trade. But I have to say, in this new world that we've tried to describe together in this panel, when everyone else is a little bit less naive in their public procurement, in their subsidies, in their state aid, whatever, even though I almost ideologically don't like it, I rather like the old world for many reasons, also because it was more of a market economy world. I understand that these days, industrial policy, strategic competition, security policy even, and digital sovereignty will affect the way we think about state subsidies, will affect the way we think about public procurement. And I think I'm ready to join the ranks of those who say that we should do it, but we should do it wisely. You can have distortive measures in many ways, and some are less distortive to the overall economy than others, and I think we as Europeans will have to consider that. And then just I need to echo what you said about Latvia. I was part of writing the Going Digital report for Latvia, so I'll just recommend Latvia in everything digital. And then Francesca, it's almost too much with all these Italians now. It's a bit tiresome when every time you join a panel you have to quote Mario Draghi, sometimes even Enrico Letta, and now I also have to quote Francesca Bria.
Three now, you can
you will be coming to Copenhagen, so you can test if I will actually do it. But what you said about Eurostack, and then I'll stop. Some say it's not all doable and it's not all realistic, and they may have a point, but we need that milestone of benchmark, if you like, in the discussion. If we did not have Eurostack as part of this whole discussion, I think it would be much more difficult to navigate. So thank you for all that work you're doing.
Yeah. Francesca, you may want to add directly, and I also read an article that you yesterday proposed procurement innovations or rules how to procure European, so maybe you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes, I mean, procurement, I think, is this big topic in government, for everyone. And I think it's this boring topic. So I think the audience is, oh my God, procurement again. But it's really key to the operation of how we do things in government. So that's why I think it matters. I think in the Eurostat report in particular, but also in the conversations we are having, we are trying to propose a real mix and match between supply and demand. So I always push back to the critic that, oh my God, this is all supply driven because you're only looking at the infrastructure and you're only looking at the capabilities. No, I think that in the world that he has been describing, where you have export control on advanced chips, where you have, honestly guys, let's look at this from a straight, you have a decoupling of the supply chains. Yes, this is happening. We're not gonna get back. I mean, supply chains are very complex, very complex. So that's why I think all the time, autarky, no, of course it's not autarky. How could it be with such complex and interconnected supply chains? So I think, yes, this is clear, but the decoupling between the US and China is happening. There is a trade war. I think there is a tech war, and hopefully not something else happening, yes? And we have export control on advanced chips, big time, yes? Even ASML, which is our lithography champion, has export control on China, yeah, with their equipment. So, and we have, actually, if you look at the US AI, the US Dominance AI Act, or however they call it, American AI Act, there is US dominance in trade deals, which means, that the US will try to export their AI to achieve AI dominance and to create jobs in the US, while we'll also need to create good jobs in Europe and competitiveness in Europe and higher productivity in Europe. And I also fear, there are things in these trade deals and in their new laws which, for example, talk about banning woke AI. I mean, this is not just something that, Donald Trump is talking about in one of his speeches. It's written in trade regulation, like banning woke AI. What does this mean? So we have to be very careful about how we implement those kind of technology in European critical mission services. That is my point. And that's why we need to leverage procurement, that's what we are saying, in order to basically give some certainty for providers that are developing European technology. So if the government can use the procurement leverage, for that, I think this is a very good measure of industrial policy. That's on the table, and we need to use it. So obviously, I think this can make a difference, but it's not the only one, because we also need to develop, solutions and scale those solutions in Europe and beyond.
Okay, I would pass. Oh, short. Okay.
Okay. So,
go ahead.
I think this is a delicate balance, right? I mean, I'm all in to say, like, we need to also in Europe protect ourselves and go back. At the same point of time, we need to ensure that we continue to benefit from innovation. And if this innovation comes from outside Europe, I think we should be open for that, as long as those vendors are playing to our values and by our rules, right? I think that for me is a key element. And coming to that, I think an important point is we cannot afford to have 28 different definitions of sovereignty and sovereign cloud and AI regulation in Europe, right? I think what is really required is that we have a clear, transparent regulation across Europe, and then not each and every nation tries to bring in their own stuff. I think that for me is a mandatory thing that will help drive innovation in Europe too.
So harmonizing, creating a common playground and framework. Okay, Gatis, you also want to
just 2 points for me. I think we should go into this details and specific and be quite objective criteria, because I think we will not get into the good solution if we'll go with a banner made in EU. Because we need to see what's underneath, what are those criteria that we want to achieve through this sovereignty aspect. As we discussed before, if we speak about legal, we speak about the power of jurisdiction, under which jurisdiction is the power of this tooling that we are using. If we speak about data, we talk about access autonomy, processing practices, and so on. If we speak about technology, it's about no lock-in with proprietary software. It could be also European software that we are getting into the lock-in situation. So I think we should be more specific if we speak about procurement practices for government, not to go along on made in EU. So we get to have in more specific details about, and then if anyone can provide, so it will also be the one who will motivate the innovation, because you will have to succeed in all those criteria. Other aspect, if we speak for open source and EU stack and such things, I think it's very essential, so we don't continue fragmentation of European solutions across European countries. It will work only if we work as a single European Union, as it will be enough strong players, because for all the open source, the most essential thing is that you have like a community around this who can develop, who can infuse innovation in the products, that it's not only like subsidized by government, this development and innovation. So I think it's very important that we have such initiatives as of Eurostack, that now Germany, France, Italy are joining forces together also. So I think the essential part is that we don't fragment our solutions in this kind of approach.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Martin, you already mentioned the regulatory framework, and public procurement is part of that, and we have a lot of regulatory framework in Europe. Does this framework support innovation and sovereignty, or do you need something else, a bit more space to move, or what would be your wish to the Commission to foster everything what was said here?
So I think Europe is very strong about its values, and it's good that we protect those. When I hear my colleague Nick Hagel earlier today in a keynote gave some numbers, and he was talking about like 240 different agencies across Europe that are kind of issuing regulation about this, I think that doesn't help, right? A regulation can fuel and even accelerate innovation if it's a clear framework that's easy to understand, because it can trigger investments in those areas where it's most needed, instead of trying here and there. And I think that is something that we need to focus on, that we get the regulation simplified. It is necessary. I think it's super important that we do have regulation and not take this approach that other parts of the world take, to say we test it first, and if something goes wrong we can still act, right? I think it's good to think about it before. It's also important that it's not just about legal topics but also about ethical topics when we talk about AI and so on and so forth. But the regulation needs to be unified across Europe, and it needs to be simple. That one.
Just a brief comment here. Maybe the question is not what we should ask of the European Commission. Maybe the question is what we should ask of our own national governments in all the member states, because they have way too much of a national focus when they talk about how to bring about innovation, and not enough of a European focus. And if we mean business with the scale that we've all touched upon more or less, we need to think about European innovation ecosystems. I think you all three know more about that than I do, but that's a starting point. And then I agree with you, Martin, that these should not be closed European innovation ecosystems. Yes. We should, of course, still be open. And the joke is now that, 10 years ago we didn't want to let the Chinese in to see what we're doing in terms of innovation. Well, now we have to pull the bridge down to make sure that we go to China and see what they're doing, because they're actually ahead of us in many areas. So we cannot close this continent down in terms of innovation, but we need to be more European in the way we think about it.
Okay. You wanted to add, or just?
Yeah, no, I think this one is the last point, just to get a dialogue, is really the key part, because again, all the time I talk about the Eurostack and building capabilities and building technology, which also means, our knowledge, industrial capacity. Yes, because not everybody understands that this is the industry of today and the future. And when we say we build capabilities, means we are building industrial capacity in Europe. So we have an industrial plan for the continent. Otherwise, we're going to go into a kind of colony state, developing world, and we don't want to see that, of course. But that should be, I think, the tension and the plan, and that's where we have to put our resources and invest to get there. But at the same time, of course, Europe wants to stay open. We want to gather knowledge and capacity and interact internationally. But I think that's the key part. Are we able to do that? So just not to, I would like to mention the elephant in the room, if I may, just to get a little bit of spice going on. So the SAP, for example, agreement with OpenAI. I think for me is, the question there would be, if we are taking European, like US technology, even if we try to control it as much as we can, according to some compliance with European regulation, then we collaborate with OpenAI and with the AI companies from the US. My question is, are we able to actually create ourselves the capacity and the knowledge to then go deeper in the systems and be autonomous later on? Or are we giving even more of our capabilities to these players, which are, by the way, eating our market? I mean, I'm an economist by training, and it's okay to look at the technology, but you have to look at the market. You have to look at the market share, at the capabilities, at the investment, at the macroeconomic level, and we are losing big time to these players. So 30% of our investment goes abroad. We are losing a lot of startups to the US. We are losing knowledge, capacity, market share. So the question is, are we able to do that? So are we able to still, acquire the knowledge we need in order to innovate on our own terms and do that next generation technology built in Europe or not? And this is, I think, the big dilemma that we're facing, because we can do those kind of deals only if we have that in mind and clear. Otherwise, they're gonna, at the end, run our AI models in Europe for education, for government, for schools, and so on. And this is not sovereign at all. Then we are losing sovereignty, and we're gonna lose sovereignty really big time.
I think Martin is really keen.
Yeah, I think I need to make a comment on that, right? So, first of all, I fully agree in the topic of whatever possible vendor lock-in and so on and so forth, right? This topic of OpenAI and that we deploy it in the sovereign cloud in Germany is one element of opening the government market in Germany to AI models. It does not mean that we only work with OpenAI. As a matter of fact, my conviction is that large language models at some point of time will become a commodity, right? And what the approach is that we as a technology vendor in Europe take is that we give customers a choice. So we work with OpenAI, we work with other large language models, with Mistral from Europe, with Alpha from Germany. We built this in our own business technology platform as an AI hub, where the customer has a choice to decide on which language model they want to connect to build it into their applications. And the topic was just that if we want to have large language models or generative AI in government, we need to also give a chance or the possibility to offer models that are from outside Europe. I think that is the point why we decided on the OpenAI statement.
Thanks for adding. This also, goes into the direction of having options, having choices. And that was the perfect introduction for the last 10 minutes and the topics of how to foster, the second part of our panel, how to foster AI and cloud usage in the public sector. And Gatis, you might want to talk a bit about AI in the Latvian public sector, how you use it. And I think you also build up a center for that, or a competency center, right?
Yeah. Recently, this year, we established a National AI Center, and it was like a very interesting, like a partnership between academia, industry, and the government. We created one legal organization which will serve as enabler and between the institutions, and will drive also application of AI in the sectors, in different sectors. But for public sector, we've been lucky that to have the companies that are working on language technologies for a long time. When we were speaking about like machine translation and such things, and now we have developed into the AI as well, and the AI is applied in the government public sector across different applications, such as digital assistance for the citizens that most of the government institutions have implemented, and there are some also other applications in the security and defense sectors that we are defending our eastern border with solutions of AI in partnership with different those. Forget the word. Just eastern border flank, we have different AI solutions to protect and to see whether someone is crossing the border or not crossing. And one of the recent advancements that we've made by one of our also companies, not only for Latvia but for Europe, we created this European Union large language model. That's 30 billion models that involves all the European languages plus Ukrainian language plus Turkish language, and that has been created as a base model that can be now used and published in Hugging Face, that can now be used all by private companies, by government. I think it's a very good example of how to ensure this sovereignty of our also AI technologies in Europe.
Okay, thanks for that insight. We also saw when we've been to Riga last year exactly this model or this solution that was really impressive. Ulrik, so we already said AI is great having in the public sector, but how can we ensure that the public sector or public sector organizations aren't just consumers or passive consumers, but really actively shape the development and usage of AI and cloud?
Well, I know more about Denmark than the rest of Europe, but in Denmark this is really
you can learn a lot from Denmark.
A project where you have to have cooperation between the municipality level, the government, but also companies like Netcompany that are willing to provide the capabilities to use AI, digital AI assistance, whatever. The Prime Minister this spring said that she wants to free 30,000 cold hands and turn them into warm hands. 30,000 is not a lot in Europe, but in Denmark, a small country, that's a lot. So our teachers, our nurses, our welfare workers in general can stop spending hours every day on statistics and on filling in blankets and so on. They can maybe just speak to an AI assistant, or the AI assistant can even just do this on its own. We will be part of that process, and we will be launching in Denmark 3 what we call large-scale AI projects for the public sector. I hope we'll get there by Christmas. And again, these are things that we could easily roll out in the rest of Europe. We don't have scale enough, so all the good ideas coming from Latvia, coming from Martin, Francesca, from my own company, we are not good enough in Europe at scaling them out, and that's part of the reason why we keep being, well, maybe not world champions, but European champions at uptake of AI, but not on innovation. Maybe that race is already over, but we have to keep innovating to maybe be the world champions in the next level, the next gen technology, but still make sure that we don't give up on AI that holds enormous potential for creating, and now we're back in geopolitics and the planetary scene, but to solve this world's problems around climate, around health, around education. There's an enormous promise there with AI, so we also need to keep the positive tone about it, while with our European values protecting the vulnerable in our societies.
Yes. Martin, I saw you nodding. As a German or European company, you would fully go with this statement, or would you like to add something on that, what Ulrik just said, what's needed?
Well, I think when we talk about AI in government, everybody's very often talking about like the citizen services, right? Because that's where you can do a lot of stuff, which is true, right? You can certainly have whatever, using chatbots and large language model, automate stuff that's going on. But I think what we should not forget is what we would typically call the back-end processes, which is like the financials and HR. And so that also there you have a ton of possibilities to implement AI, sometimes also less risky, because you don't run the risk that somebody doesn't get the financial aid that he or she should be getting, right? And when we talk to our governments globally, government customers globally, we get a lot of, how to say, low-hanging fruit use cases, right? Whatever, assistant for the public administration servants, right? Where when it comes to whatever language, text, AI, based search, these type of stuff, right? Document extraction to summarize whatever the documentation that somebody's handing in for a certain application or so. So I think we should not only consider these fancy use cases that we sometimes see, but there's a lot of stuff in the more like boring administrating processes that can still leverage AI and generate a lot of potential.
Okay, yeah, Gatis.
Yeah, just to add on a note, I think one of the reasons why the government solutions are not scaling because of how government functions are organized. And if we look at government in most of the cases, government functions are organized very fragmented way. every institution is doing all the full stack kind of support functions of different, and to get the scale, I think what we've started in Latvia to do, because of economic reasons, because of efficiency, we start to design competence centers which are providing services for the other agencies. Within those competence centers, you can get enough large scale to transform whole government and whole government processes, such as, accounting, human resource, IT support. And in those cases, when you implement AI, the scale is like noticeable for all the government. Otherwise, you don't have such high-level competencies in those small organizations, and it's inefficient. And then we are staying at like a low-level kind of pilot projects. And I think it's also important to structurally review. And technology allows us, the cloud solutions allow us to transform those functions across government to horizontal way of providing those functions.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, Martin.
Yeah, so one comment to that. We see this also in other countries, like the UK is applying it, Australia is applying, like having lead agencies that provide the services to the rest of government. And I think bringing that to European level, it might be a little bit kind of, far out, but to think about European level, to say, why does not one country take the lead on certain elements for the entire European Union or so, I think would be a big lever to pull to move forward.
Yep. Great idea to further think about, unfortunately not to discuss because time is running out, but I have one last question to all of you. You already touched a bit on it, so imagine you have one wish with regard to digital sovereignty and fostering digital sovereignty. What would you wish for? It can be a big one or a small one, but how to foster digital sovereignty with a wish. Ulrik, you might want to start.
A truly unified European single market in all its dimensions, capital, services, goods, labor, but certainly also digital. I think that would go a long way in solving some of our problems around scaling. And I think it would be perhaps the grandest digital sovereignty project for Europe I could fathom.
Okay, thank you. Francesca?
Well, for me, it's easy, the euro stock, because I think actually it's not there.
I thought about stealing it, but that would have been unfair.
We have the euro, we have a single market, which is not completed, but we are there. But we do not have a digital union, like we do not have critical digital infrastructures which are European. And I think we have to get there. But if I may also say something really quickly, maybe 2 points for me. I think it's not okay to just look at AI only as the models. I think the models and maybe beyond LLM would be great, because transformer is not the end of the world. There will be a next generation of models that maybe, where we could lead. But obviously at the moment, I think what government should also look at is the AI infrastructure part. Also in your energy consumption, in the data center you're building, the water usage, because this is massive. So this is not something we can ignore. That's where money is going, that's where capital is going. So we need to make sure we rationalize that in Europe. We understand how much energy, water this consume, and the AI gigafactories, they should enable real industrial innovation in Europe, because otherwise, why are we spending all this money building infrastructure that consumes so much resources, energy, water, that we need for something else? So finally, I would also say that the use of data in AI and all the questions of intellectual property, copyright, manipulation of data in social media, this is an important part of the problem. So I know we don't want to make it only pessimistic, but I don't think it's about making pessimistic. It's about we don't want to create a public sphere where data is manipulated, elections are interfered, and we have crazy right-wing populists taking over Europe. This is also happening via AI and social media, so I think that's why we want to align it. So it's not like Europe cares about the value only. I think Europe cares about doing digital sovereignty to make it to save democracy. To have democracy here, strengthen democracy. So I think this is not just an add-on, it's a real essence of why we care about digital sovereignty.
Democracy at the groundwork. Martin, your wish.
I think it's very close to what Ulrik said, right? I think we cannot afford to build 28 different sovereign clouds, right? One sovereign cloud for Europe, and that will also address the topic that Francesca mentioned, right? We don't need a gigafactory in each and every country, but we should take a European approach to see what is required there.
Okay, thank you. Gatis, your wish.
Yeah, I would go then for digital twin of single market, it would be complete and real portability of platforms and of infrastructures. There are several attempts by Europe to reach it, standards-based portability, but it's not yet, we are not yet there, and hopefully we'll get there.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a wish list for everyone who was listening, for all politicians, for all civil servants, civil society, companies, and everyone who's working on that topic. Thank you very much for that discussion and for the time. Thank you, dear audience, for listening, and we now head over to Linda again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther, for this lovely moderation and for hosting this great session.